See here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. All right, Maurissa, I made you the host. Super excited.
Let me share my screen. Can you see it on your end?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. And you'll have to excuse if there's any sound in the background. I'm sitting at my gym's pool right now because it's way quiet than my crazy house with my boys home for summer. So if you hear some music in the background, that's where it's coming from. Awesome. So today I really wanted to go over where a lot of our transformations come from because I do think that, Instagram especially is just loaded with transformations with people, and you never really know the background behind how they got those transformations. And so I've had a lot of clients come in and just say, it is my discipline. I'm just not disciplined enough to make this transformation or whatever it is. And a lot of times it's actually not eating less, it's eating more and training in a specific way. So that's what I really wanted to go over because I do feel like diet culture has brainwashed us to thinking that we have to eat as little as possible. We have to do as much cardio as possible. And if you can't sustain that, well, then you're never going to get your dream body. So this week I did want to break down something that surprises, again, a lot of women and a lot of our clients. That when they join HF Physique or just Hungry Fitness Team in general, you typically tend to eat more to get to the goals that you want to do. And real transformations don't come from just shrinking your body, again, eating as little as possible and doing as much cardio as possible, because yes, if you did that, the scale may change and it will change. But typically you would get to that weight that you think is your goal weight and you're still not happy because we haven't built the body that you want. So the science behind why reverse dieting works and why strength training works. Excuse me if I pause for a minute, I'm just letting people in as they come in. But let's start with reverse dieting. So it's a methodical approach to increasing calories after a dieting phase. And I will say most women live in the diet phase. I can't tell you how many times I've had women tell me I've been eating, 1,100 calories for 5, 10, 15 years since I was in high school, and they're in their 40s now, off and on, and they just don't understand why they're not making that approach or why they're not making consistent progress anymore. So after a dieting phase, we need to restore your metabolism.
But in essence, the city of Bridgetown, the southern part of the city,
Oh,
is very void of
do mute.
right? Open to the public. The only one in
I think
proximity.
you can just
here
mute
is
all
the campus facility, all of it.
participants.
So the last thing I want to see is if we put way.
All right, can you still see my screen okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So what a reverse diet does is it restores our metabolism. I hear a lot too that my metabolism's broken. No one's metabolism's broken. When you consistently undereat, what happens is your metabolism down regulates. So that becomes your new maintenance. So a lot of times to get the more progress, you have to keep cutting and cutting and cutting. Well, I always say this, like, we are not toddlers. We need fuel. Your body needs fuel to function, and your body needs fuel to do what you want it to do. So we restore metabolism, energy, and we optimize hormones through nutrition. So it helps your body adapt upward rather than crash and burn. Once you've built your baseline and your metabolism is humming along again, you can enter a smart fat loss phase. And it's pretty funny. I have a lot of clients that we go through a reverse diet. We really focus on strength training, which I'm going to dive into a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, where they came in at is actually their new fat loss, but they're making so much more progress. And it's just because we outlined a very good platform beforehand before just rushing into fat loss. The goal isn't to drastically cut calories, it's to create small, consistent deficits fueled by strength training and protein-rich meals so you can lose fat while keeping muscle, but it's sustainable. And my goal, especially for my one-on-one clients, is that they never need to have coaching again. That once they coach, that they have all the education, the tools, everything they need to continue this journey, and they never have to crash diet again. So I did want to go over this client. So this is currently my client, Amy. She's been with me for about 3 years now. She came into me with the photo on the left, and by no means she still looks great, but it just wasn't where she wanted to be, especially going through perimenopause. She didn't feel good. She was super fatigued. She did hours and hours of HIIT a week. She didn't really strength train because she didn't want to get bulky. She ate about 1,200 calories a day, and this is where the magic really happened with her. Is I remember her coming into me and I was like, we're going to eat more and we're going to strength train and I'm going to cut out all your cardio. We only focused on steps. And I remember having daily conversations with her with how scared she was, which it can be a very emotional, challenging journey. When we end where we started was about 1,200. When we ended our reverse, we were about 2,400 calories. And she has now finished 2 fat loss phases with me, eating 18 plus calories. And this is her now on the right. And actually, this is a little bit of an older picture, but she is absolutely crushing it. Again, she mainly focuses on steps, a little cardio within her workouts, strength training 3 times a week, and eating more than she ever has. So 7 things that really fuel those big transformations that you see is one, like we just talked about, reverse dieting. We don't jump straight into fat loss. I think about, I would say 95% of my clients, unless they've been eating at their maintenance or above maintenance far beyond they joined with me, I will always start someone at least maintenance or going into a reverse diet to one, set a really healthy foundation, because it's a lot harder to stay on track and stay consistent when you're just thrown into a fat loss hoping to swim. It's a lot easier to learn consistency, habits, how to hit your goals when you're at maintenance. And then when that feels really great, it starts to become routine, habit, fat loss becomes so much easier. We build metabolism first so your body actually responds when it's time to a cut. And again, my goal, and I know every coach on this team's goal, is to keep your calories as high as possible while still making progress, because not only do we want you to see the progress that you want so badly, but we also want you to feel really, really great doing it. And we want you to be able to sustain that progress for life, not just for a quick fix. So eat more to build muscle. Most of our clients eat significantly more than they did before HF, and they look leaner. That's the magic of muscle. So I say this a lot too. I know that, we have an epidemic with obesity and things like that, but I also think we have an epidemic with being under muscled. I think building muscle can be really scary for a lot of women, especially if you've been told, lifting heavy makes you bulky, you're just going to get bigger. But if you can build muscle, not only are you ramping up your metabolism, you're optimizing hormones, it's essential for bone health, but you're actually building the body of your dreams. And a lot of times when you scroll on Instagram, it's women that have spent years and years building muscle first to achieve that physique. And it's not just cutting calories anymore. Prioritizing protein daily. So we coach you on hitting your protein goals because it is critical for fat loss, muscle repair, and satiety. So a lot of women, I would say probably 75%, undereat protein, and they wonder why they're strength training and hitting their macros perfectly, but they're not seeing any progress. A lot of it is going to be that you're just not eating enough protein to gain the muscle that you want to. That's also causing you to overeat on other areas. So protein is going to be a big, big factor here. train for strength, not sweat. So HF Physique workouts are designed to help you build, not burn out. There is no endless cardio, just intentional progressive strength work. Your goal should always be to build muscle. And then of course, you know, cardio and HIIT and steps and all those other things, they're important. They're important for heart health. They're so important in other areas. But if you're trying to build the body of your dreams, 90% of it's going to come from strength workouts and building that muscle, not just doing endless amounts of cardio and HIIT.
Or trying to get the most calories burned on your Apple Watch.
Yes, I see that a lot too. And like, you know, I had a client the other day that showed me her Apple Watch and it was like, she burned like 1,500 calories in like a tennis session. And she was wondering why she's not making progress doing so much cardio. And I really had to explain like basics to her again. For one, Apple Watches, all those watches are going to be significantly wrong when it comes to calorie burn. But again, building the body of your dreams is going to come from body composition, and that strictly comes from building enough muscle to support the body that you want. Measure more than the scale. And this is something, again, I've struggled with. I used to have a very emotional connection to the scale. So if it bumped up at all, I would go into an absolute panic. I would restrict calories. I would go do an hour of cardio that day. The scale meant my worth to me for a very, very long time. And once I learned that I was actually 30 pounds heavier, but I had a body that I loved, that the scale really wasn't a metric that I wanted to follow at all. And it was just another piece of data. So we recommend tracking strength PRs, progress photos, energy levels, clothes fitting, not just your weight. Again, the scale can be a great tool, especially if you're in fat loss, but it doesn't tell you the full story because so much goes into what we see on the scale. Inflammation, hormones, sodium retention, stress, sleep, digestion, the list can go on and on. So if you are tracking the scale, I do recommend you track it daily so you can see your weekly averages. But I also recommend putting a lot of your other, like how you make progress into inches, how your clothes are fitting, how strong you're getting. Are you sleeping better? Is your menstrual cycle better? There's so many other ways to dictate progress beyond just what a scale says. And respect the season. So fat loss is just one season of your fitness life. Sometimes you're maintaining, sometimes you're building, all of it matters. So I will say fat loss should be a very small portion or a very small season. You should not live in the diet phase. And I would say most of the year, you should actually be at maintenance or above, because if you can be at maintenance and above for most of the year, you're going to have the most successful fat loss phase. It's going to be an easier fat loss phase. And again, you're giving your body what it needs to thrive. Oops. Build a better relationship with food. So no more guilt, no more scarcity mindset. Our clients learn to fuel, not fear food, and it changes everything. This was a big thing for me as well, along with so many other clients, is before I would go into any fat loss phase with any client, I really want to make sure that their relationship with food is there and they feel comfortable around food. In fact, you know, I have clients that if they come in binge eating, we really work on those things first before we go into any fat loss phase, because a fat loss phase makes it so much harder. So really focusing on a better relationship with food, really focusing on strength training, really focus just on consistency at maintenance will lead you to such an easier fat loss overall. And then these again are just some transformations that clients have had: eating more, strength training, and working, I like to say, like smarter, not harder, and they feel so much better. So I am going to go back here.
I'm going to pull up too our questions also.
Awesome. I know there was a question box. So if there's any questions or any questions in the chat either.
Or even anybody that wants to like share their experience, or have you struggled with any of these things?
Absolutely. I always love hearing other people's experience just because I've had a mindset of like binge eating. I was overweight, I felt awful, and then I went the opposite direction. I like was on keto, juice cleanses, all these things to where finally I got to a point where I had enough. I actually hired my own coach who I'm still so thankful for to this day because they completely changed everything about how I feel about nutrition, workouts, just like biofeedback for me. But I have been there before, and so I know it is a struggle. And if you can overcome that, it is such like a beautiful thing.
It looks like I'm seeing a question here that someone asked on the questions. The minute I get into maintenance, I will eat and snack on things that I'm not tracking, and throughout the week it adds up. When I'm in a deficit tracking, I will stick to one cookie, but when I'm trying to mindfully eat in maintenance, I'll eat 3 to 4. It feels like it's like I feel better in restriction. I feel like I can't trust myself.
I experience this a lot too. And especially, into maintenance, we do feel like we have a lot more wiggle room, which you do. And I actually say maintenance is a great way to have that better relationship with food. So, track 2 cookies in maintenance, enjoy those 2 cookies. You do have a calorie range in maintenance too. So it's never just like a set number, but I do understand that people thrive on like restriction. They have really thrive on like routine. And I feel like a deficit, you obviously have to have a lot more routine. But I will say maintenance really allows you to see your relationship with food and where you can like start building a better relationship. So I would say enjoy, 2 cookies, 3 cookies. Just make sure that you're also going back to the basics of getting your protein in, focusing on whole foods, getting your fiber in. Because again, it does really matter when you go back into a fat loss phase. And if anyone has anything to piggyback off of that.
I was thinking of one
Also,
thing that, oh, sorry. Should I
I was
go?
just gonna say, also remembering it's not just about like a big part of it is like, yes, aesthetically we want to look a certain way. In maintenance, we're not, we don't have to eat less. We do have more flexibility, but we also have to think about optimal health. What are our blood markers? How are we feeling? How do I feel when I eat those 4 cookies versus those 2 cookies? Like it can make a big difference in how you're sleeping, especially if you're snacking before bed. It can play, you can just you have the big spike in your blood sugar and then a drop and then you don't feel very good. So like focusing too on like asking yourself those questions and getting curious about, yes, I can have those 4 cookies, but really how does it make me feel? Is it really like why do I want 4 cookies instead of 2? And kind of digging in to figuring out the why behind it can be really helpful. And also remembering like this is life. Like this is not just for to look a certain way. Like this is how we want to feel for the rest of our life, how we want our body to function for the rest of our life, not just one temporary point in time.
I think too,
No.
oh, go ahead, Henrietta. I forgot you had
Oh, yeah,
something to
no,
say.
I was just thinking from a different perspective also of like something that I think about at least with both for myself but also with my clients is like figuring out like well, of course the baseline is like you want to eat meals and you want to eat meals that are nutrient dense, right? Like that's the premises of like that's the baseline. But then if you also want snacks and you enjoy snacks like most of us do, then it kind of figuring out what can I get away with? Like how much snacks can I eat but still keep my shape? And I think if you are curious about figuring that out, you can figure out what's the threshold of I can actually have a cookie or two every day and I have my healthy habits both when it comes to nutrition and movement and sleep and all the things. So, and you can have the cookies, but maybe you can't have 4, but maybe you can have 2. So just experimenting a little bit with that when you have reached the maintenance phase, especially if you are noticing that you kind of have a difficulty with kind of keeping it at bay, then see it as an experiment and just see like, okay, what can I get away with so that I can kind of have it all, but still also be able to maintain the goal that I have for how I want to look and how I want to feel. Because it's also like both emotionally and mentally, I think, if one is always kind of going above what keeps that physique, then that's kind of disappointing for oneself also. So it's kind of like yourself disappointing. So I would say put in the effort as you do in a deficit to figure that out, and then you will have a lifelong, knowledge about what you can get away with and what you can't, basically.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was going to say was along those lines of like, I think when you're in a deficit, you're so focused and you have a plan, which feels really nice. And so you know kind of what your guardrails are, and what you need to stick to keep seeing progress. And I think a lot of times, just like how I would kind of relate this would be like if I'm signed up for a half marathon or I signed up for a race, right? I'm training, I'm focused, I have a plan. And then I get and I do the race and it's so exciting. And then the next week I don't run again. And the next month I don't run. It's like all or nothing. Like I just don't have a plan for after the race. And I've done that multiple times. I think I've read a lot about how people do that. It's very common for people. They could like do a marathon and then not run again for the next year if they're not just runners. And so I think having a plan for after the race or after the deficit is so important, or after the vacation, even. Like maybe you want to go on a vacation and you want to be flexible and enjoy and probably be in a calorie surplus. But like, okay, you're getting home on Sunday. Are you going to let that calorie surplus continue all the way through the next week? Or like, do you have a plan for Monday? Because it's really easy to just be in that mindset. And I think coming out of a deficit, you're so focused and it feels so good. And also it feels like you're kind of like, oh, when I'm not on this deficit anymore, I'm going to have X, Y, or Z when I'm not on this deficit. So you kind of start to think about that. And then you get out of the deficit and you have a party and then you have a trip and then you have a birthday and you're kind of doing the free for all that you've been looking forward to, but it just continues. And then you don't feel good and you're frustrated. And so I think, like Henrietta said, having a plan so you can enjoy those events maybe in a different way than you did while on a deficit, but still with some guardrails in place so that you can maintain your progress from an aesthetic standpoint, because that's really fun, but also from just like feeling good and feeling energized and feeling consistent with your training and your recovery and all those things. And that's going to look a little different for everyone, right? So that's where one-on-one coaching can be a really amazing tool, is you have a coach to like carry you from a deficit into maintenance so you feel really confident making those choices and bringing more flexibility in, because that is the best place to be, is in maintenance, because you do have a lot of flexibility, but that can easily turn into a surplus if you don't think about what that's going to entail for you, and kind of like what things you want to add more of and what things you might still need to sacrifice. Because yeah, for some of us, it can be easy to just eat by 1,000 calories more a day and not even think you're making any changes.
And
So
I think also like you oftentimes, not always, but for many, I think when one stops a deficit, we don't just change the way we eat, but now perhaps we're also moving less. Because when we were in the deficit, we were like so focused on getting in movement to help with our deficit as well. But maybe that wasn't really sustainable. So now we also are moving less. So we're eating maybe not more, but we're eating differently and we're moving less. And that equals change. Like there will be at some
that's
point, there's going to be
positive.
a change. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I
So,
think a lot of times we might not be eating with more frequency, but we're eating
no,
more calorically dense food. So
exactly.
it feels like we're eating the same amount, but really we're eating quite a bit more calories,
Mm.
but not as satisfied because it's more, less nutrient dense, more calorically dense foods.
I think having a goal too in maintenance helps you kind of stick to where you want to be in maintenance per se, even though you'll have flexibility, but rather than like a fat loss goal or like a number goal or whatever it may be, I also have clients do like, okay, I'm going to do a strength goal or a biofeedback marker goal, knowing that, this nutrition is going to affect my goal now. And it gives them, again, something to work towards.
Yeah, I love that.
Anyone else with any questions?
I think, yeah, just if anyone has any, Ask away.
Came in a message.
Oh, it's helped me a lot when Maurissa eases me into a cut and eases me back up to maintenance. Definitely.
I'm pretty conservative about my cuts, and I'm pretty conservative when we go back up to maintenance, just because going from a cut and a deficit straight up to maintenance can feel like a lot. And I found that a lot of people start to freak out. They want to go back to the cut, just like the previous
Mhm.
client said, is like, it's easier. I don't want, like, I want to be this. So I do tend to be a little bit more conservative when I'm in a reverse with someone or when I'm going into a deficit, just to ease. And it's not like throwing someone overboard, hoping they swim, and hit their goals.
Yeah, and I think that that is also very individual. How, like, if I have a client that is worried, it just feels natural to like take smaller steps, basically. So, and that's what also the one-on-one coaching is so good for, because you get that, yeah, individual assessment, so to speak.
And then you do have clients that are like, let's just like send it. And we
Yeah.
get a little more aggressive at first, and that's okay too. Typically, clients that just like want to send it, their fat loss phases are a little bit more aggressive, but they're shorter. They're very
Mhm.
short amount of time, and then we build back up. And same, if I'm throwing someone into a reverse and they don't mind, you know, the scale maybe bumping up a little bit and seeing those big dips up and down, the reverse is probably going to be a little bit more aggressive at first, but I will say it all tends to balance out at the end. So it
Yeah.
just depends on personal preference.
For sure. I
And
think
also biofeedback, I'm thinking also can be like one thing. Like if someone has had like horrible biofeedback through the deficit, then like maybe making a little bit of a bigger jump to kind of balance it out a little bit.
yeah.
S-
Last question, Maurissa, kind of on that note, someone asked, going into a fat loss phase soon, how much fat loss is a good expectation if you are 30% body fat, and how long would you recommend doing the fat loss phase for? Been doing HF physique since 3 months postpartum and absolutely loving it.
So fat loss looks very different for everyone. I will say, a sustainable amount of weight when you're in fat loss is anywhere from half a pound up until like maybe 2 pounds is even a little aggressive, but I would say half a pound to 2 pounds a week. If you have a lot more weight to lose, it's going to look probably closer to 2 pounds a week. If you're pretty lean to begin with, it's going to be a little bit slower. Um, Fat loss can be, I typically tell everyone, it's sometimes 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes it's 24 weeks. It really depends, again, how aggressive you get in it and where biofeedback markers are. If you're feeling really good, you're doing it in a sustainable way, you're losing half a pound to a pound a week, energy is great, recovery is great, digestion feels good. I mean, you can stay there for really as long as you feel good. Your body will tell you when it's time to come out of a fat
For
loss.
sure.
Recovery goes down.
Irritability,
Yeah, all
brain fog.
feel pretty awful. I say, like, your body will typically say, "Hey, it's time for more fuel." Even like sex drive. Like I've had clients say,
Mhm.
I used to have a very high sex drive. Just this last couple weeks, I realized like I don't want my husband anywhere near me. I don't want him to touch me. I just want to sleep all day. And
Yeah.
usually I'm like, okay, we need to bring calories back up for a little bit. So really paying attention to biofeedback markers is a great way to say, hey, it's time to come back up to maintenance. I will say if you're doing a more conservative fat loss phase, you can hang in there for a lot longer than you can if
Yeah.
you're a lot more aggressive with lowering calorie intake and then getting aggressive with cardio.
Yeah. And I think too, when she says a half pound to, 1.5, 2 pounds per week, that does not mean that you have a new low of 1.5 pounds every week. That is your weekly average. So if you're weighing yourself every single day, the average of those 7 weigh-ins is going down a half a pound to 2 pounds per week. So that might mean you don't have a new low, but like your highs are coming down or your midpoints are coming down to equal an average that's going down. So that's where if you are actively doing a fat loss phase or a calorie deficit and you're trying to assess if it's working or not working, like really doing that daily weigh-in is going to be so helpful, especially for female clients because our weight just fluctuates so much more. A male client probably could weigh in twice a week and we could get like a really good gauge on what's happening. For women, it's not usually that way. If you just weigh in once or twice a week, it's really hard to tell like, okay, is it going down? Because a half a pound a week is not very much. So the more detail we have, the better. You could weigh in on like 2 high fluctuating days and have the rest of the week be really low and are seeing progress and miss it. So I think that's one thing too. Like if the scale is something that's challenging for you, kind of trying to work through that so that you can just see it as data and get those weekly averages, and that can be really helpful. So yeah, I think that's great.
Do
No.
not check calories. You're looking at weight, measurements, and photos. And if you see change in any of the three, you are making progress. So say your weight stayed stable that week, maybe it even popped up because you're on your menstrual cycle or sleep was bad or whatever it is. But say you lost, half an inch or a quarter of an inch in your hips, like you're still making progress. That caloric amount is working for you. Don't cut just to cut.
Yeah. There was a
Yeah.
question if we can see weekly averages in the HF app, and sorry, we can't.
Sadly, that is not,
Yeah.
we've been asking for that
Yeah.
forever. So we just, as coaches, we just pull those ourselves
Calculated.
and we look at the weekly averages ourselves. But for you, putting it in a spreadsheet is good. That's something that I will even use like AI for. I'll just say like,
Yeah, me too.
plug in all the 7 and just say, what's the average of these 7? So just, I don't have to type them in one at a time in my calculator, but spreadsheets are really great for that. Like just putting in your weigh-ins every day, and then you can just highlight the cells to get the sum. And also if you are in need of a new scale, I really like the Withings scale, kind of a weird name, Withings. That syncs with the HF app, so it will auto upload your weight to the HF app, which is nice. And it will also on the Withings app, I can just look at my log of all my numbers, and so it's really easy for me to just pull them for a weekly average too. And it will tell me my weekly averages on there. So that is another one, but yes, I just calculate that once a week. I'll just type them all in, not now, but like if I'm doing a calorie deficit, on Sunday, I'll take my photos, do my measurements, and calculate my weekly average, look at my activity level through the week to see like, did I actually do my set cardio or weightlifting? Okay, what was my step average? And those are kind of all the things, how accurate was my tracking, kind of give myself like a sort of like a grade, and then use all that data to see what is my progress. Did I kind of fall off anywhere? Could I bring things up anywhere? Should I make an adjustment or wait another week? And that's kind of how I personally do things. And also with clients, similar. So
And I would say, expect just like you said, to piggyback on that, before you cut, make sure that tracking is accurate and consistent, because sometimes we see a spike on the scale, but maybe I only tracked like 70% accurately. I didn't track peanut butter or oils or dressings. Well, I
right.
ate like towards maintenance that week. So it wasn't my calories that were a problem. I just didn't track consistently. So that's a big one I see as well. Alcohol is a big one. But those
Yeah.
little things really do add up. Like the BLTs, those bite, licks, and taste, they can take you from being in your caloric deficit to maintenance really fast.
For sure. Yeah.
Actually, I say to like my clients, because very often I hear that, oh, I didn't track the alcohol. Like, and I'm like, tracking the alcohol is the easiest thing to estimate ever. Like, so if you're out and you're choosing not to estimate your food because you think it's like, but estimate the alcohol, because if you had a glass of wine, you can literally just put in white wine. Like, it doesn't have to be in the brand, or if it was a drink, then the drink has a name, you can just put it in. Like, it's so easy. And of course, now I'm talking more from a, not an emotional standpoint, of course, but I say that to all my clients, like, do track the alcohol, because then you can see like what it actually comes up to, like both also in carbs, in calories, and it's very easy. It's not hard to track.
Yeah.
Big difference overall too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Maurissa. And thank you for those that have joined. And we hope you all have a great first week of June. Yay for a new month, new opportunity to dial in our habits and really focus on like process-oriented goals this month. And we're excited to have you all here. And hopefully you're doing HF Physique and loving the full body cycle. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.